Good morning and welcome. We'll be starting up here in just a couple of minutes. While you're waiting, you can go ahead and load in your poll everywhere and maybe open up your chat and Q&A pods. We'll talk more about those things in a bit, but we'll be starting here again at the top of the hour. About one more minute, we'll get started. Just log on in. Make sure you've got your chat pod open. That's where we'll send you links to so you don't have to type everything in. And also open up the Q&A pod. That's how we're mostly communicate. And polls that we're going to be doing online. Okay, we'll give folks about 30 seconds to finish logging in, and then we'll get ourselves started. Okay, good morning and welcome. And hope everybody's having a good day. A little chilly, but not too bad today. A little light flakes out here in Ithaca. My name's David Orr. I'm the director here with the Cornell Local Roads Program. We're your New York State LTAP Center. And we're going to be talking today about local road safety plans. And then we're going to be spending some time talking about some funds, money that's available to help both implement those plans and even develop those plans. This is part of our webinar series. These are a couple of special webinars that we put together on top of our normal foundational webinars. Those are all recorded, so if you see one in the past, you can go look and record them, and there's a handout that goes with each one, so you can at least get the handout and the resources that are available to you, so feel free about doing that. If you open up your chat pod, we'll send you some links to things in a minute. And then once we're done with our two more webinars next week and the week after on snow and ice and pavement maintenance, we'll be doing our spring workshop season. So hopefully we'll see you at one of those as well. Now, if you haven't been on one of these before, in your lower left is where you can check your audio settings. If you got sound issues or something like that, we'd ask you to open your chat pod up. That's a one-way communication. We're just sending you things. It's not active. But that's how we can send you links to the handout, links to the polls, so you don't have to type that in. The Q&A pod, that's where you can put input in, and we'll actually ask you to do that. If you can't do the poll EV polls, you can use that. And if you maybe ask now and then to raise your hand, we're not using that as a ask you to raise your hand, just too many folks. But if you have an interest, put this a question or something in the Q&A, and we'll see what we can do to help you out there. But we'll just be using the raise your hand feature to ask you quick questions about whether you've got A, B, or C, things like that. Okay, so that's what that's being used for. Now, this is worth one professional development hour for continuing education for engineers here in New York State. Only the person who was registered is able to get it. And it's really a New York State specific thing, so just so you know. Now, the materials that we're looking at, again, there's a great handout. It's linked in the chat pod. And it comes from Proven Countermeasures from FHWA, the New York State Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan, and our workbook on solutions for safer roads and streets. And of course, we're always incorporating and updating things as we go. So make sure you look at those resources and handouts, and hopefully you'll pick up something today. Now, to help me out, we like to do a welcome, and that welcome means we're going to have to do some polls. And the polls are www.pollev.com/DavidOrPE or Again, if you've downloaded the app because you're a regular, that's also cool. Gives a sense of who's on today's webinar. So who do you work for? Do you work for a town, a county, a city or village, state or federal, tribal, an MPO, an authority like the Thruway Authority, a consulting firm, a contractor? You work for a living? I got a few folks today who are working for a living. Okay. Okay, so we got a good variety of folks. We got quite a few consultants. We got quite a few state or federal, and some county folks as well. Okay. What is your job? Are you an administrator, the highway superintendent, or commissioner? If you're a deputy, please check that box. Are you an engineer primarily or a planner? I expect a lot of those today, and that's what I'm seeing. Field crew, town supervisor, or board member, you do whatever the boss tells you to do, or none of the above. I would ask if you put in none of the above, if the person who clicked I there, throw that into the Q&A so that I can get a sense. And again, if you can't access the polls, and we know some people can't, you can put the answer in the Q&A. And in the background, Jody and Amanda will clear those so I can keep my hands free. So it's pretty cool. They great to have the staff, them and Barbara helping get everybody registered. Okay, so you have a lot of engineers is what I expected, but quite a few superintendents and some planners. Okay. And we have folks who work in different departments. That's good. How long have you been there? Are you brand new? When we did the webinars in January, we had quite a few brand new highway superintendents, but how long have you been there? If it's less than a year, or 20 plus years, okay? And we'll get a sense of what we've got. Okay, so we've got a lot of people who, about a quarter of the people who are less than a year, and about a quarter of the people who are 5 to 10, and then a smattering of others. Okay, that's actually fairly useful for me. Thank you. And then where are you from? And we're actually going to come back to this slide, so this is important. Click on where you're from, and you can click on the map. A lot of Syracuse, downstate, out in the island. I suspect you're still digging out from snow down there. Okay, good, useful. Thank you very much. Now, we're talking about local road safety plans, which cover all types of crashes, but what we're focused on really in some respects is roadway departures, which is one of 3 focus areas for the Federal Highway Administration. They're focusing on roadway departures, intersections, and bicycles and pedestrians. And the reason for that is roadway departures, when you do the math, and I'll show a slide of that later, are more than half of all fatalities. If you add it all up, there's a roadway departure involved. Intersections are the next biggest chunk, and New York State is working on an intersection safety action plan as we speak. And then finally, bicycles and pedestrians. The collisions between vehicles and people who are not in vehicles is never a good thing. And so there's bicycle and pedestrian focus areas as well. And New York State does have a pedestrian safety action plan as well. Now, New York State's Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan is available. It's one of the links in your resource, in your handout list. When you look at it, make sure you look at the appendices. There's a lot of really good information in the appendices, and I'll talk a little bit about what's in there. And the fact that if it's in there, it's eligible for funding, which we like that part. Now, what's the concept behind roadway departures? Again, we don't have but 1 hour. We can't go into a lot of detail here, but the idea is first, keep the vehicle on the road. This means including things like pavement markings and well-designed lanes, maybe even lighting. Keep the vehicle on the road in its lane. You're going to be in much better shape. If someone does leave it, minimize the potential for a crash. Have a good clear zone so they just run off the road a little bit and stop the vehicle and go back on their way. And if they have to crash, minimize the severity by including breakaway systems or barriers placed properly. And that's the idea behind the roadway departure concept. And again, more than half of all fatalities occur there. And this is part of the overall concept of the safe systems approach, which replaced the 3 or 4 E's we learned in college. And that means we have to have safe road users, we have to have safe roads, we have to have safe speeds, and post-crash care, which we know the golden hour is really important. And we also want to look at the vehicles. But the big difference that occurs with safe system is that we're trying to not just focus on one thing at a time. We really want to look at all of these things together so that one mistake does not lead to a fatality or a serious crash. So our goal today is to go over the concept of the local road safety plan. And we'll walk through, this is infographic available from FHWA, and one of the links actually takes you to a page where you actually can click through and see what's involved with a local road safety plan. But let's just first ask, do you have a local road safety plan? So you can click on the poll, you can click yes, yes with another agency or your MPO, no, you're not sure, you're working on one, and then of course we have our friend other. Let me go see how many others we've got here. We have any others? If you have other, again, please put in the Q&A what that means, Uh, okay, so we've got 3 who are working on one. We've got 9 who are not sure. Good thing to go back and think about it. If you don't have one, hopefully we can help you get started on that process. And if it's a yes, maybe we can talk about how to use and take advantage of that particular thing. But do you have a local road safety plan? If you work for a consulting firm, you could probably just think about, have you worked on one or not? Now, I said with another MPO possibly, okay? Now, here are the MPOs in New York State, okay? So they range all the way, of course, the largest one in terms of population is the New York City Metropolitan Transportation Council, NYMTIC, as it's sometimes called. The largest by area is the Genesee Transportation Council, GTC, and they cover everything from Seneca County to Wyoming County and all the way up to Lake Ontario. It's a huge area. If you are within one of these MPOs, they may be developing or already have developed a local road safety plan. So you may want to check with them. And we're big fans of developing these plans to include fairly large areas, county level typically, mainly just so we have enough data. And we'll talk more about that when we get into the local road safety plans themselves. So let's go back and look at a map that we had where we've got everybody listed. And when I look at this real quickly, a few of you are outside of MPO areas, but a lot of you are inside MPO areas. So if you don't know your MPO, you definitely want to pick up the phone, give them a holler, especially if you were in the no or not sure group, okay? Because having a local road safety plan has some huge advantages. As we talk about them, we'll see why. Now, what are the steps? Well, the steps are pretty simple. Now, somebody in the Q&A put, does Cornell University have one? Well, Tompkins County and Ithaca have one, and yes, Cornell can be included in that. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that when we do an example later on. So the idea is to develop a local road safety plan. You're going to first identify your stakeholders. Who needs to be included in the discussions? It's not just the highway department. It's not just the people who live on the roads. A whole bunch of stakeholders. We'll come back to that in a minute. You're going to then use safety data. This is a data-driven system to develop risk factors or places you want to focus your efforts. Okay? Choose proven solutions. There's no reason to go out and try to invent something. There's tons of proven solutions, low-hanging fruit. Use them first. Okay? And then you have to implement the solutions, which can be one of the hardest steps because that means everybody has to be on board. The highway department, the elected board, and the citizenry, which goes back to step 1, identifying those stakeholders. And the idea of identifying stakeholders is a lot like a road safety audit or road safety assessment. You bring a whole bunch of people in with different viewpoints, you get all their feedback, and you help identify where you want to focus your efforts. So let's just ask, who do you think you would include as stakeholders on a local road safety plan? And this is a wordle, so do it one word at a time. If you want to do a multiple phrase, you need to put the words together, or you need to put a space bar underscore there. But yeah, you want to include the schools, you want to include the police. Yeah. Obviously, the people who live on the residents, the highway agency is going to have to be involved. The traveling public, people going to work, businesses. Yeah. And this is actually the first step, is you do the same concept. You take everybody that might be involved and you try to put together a local road safety plan stakeholder group. It can be relatively small. It can be pretty large in this case. And you can even give people places to give feedback. Some of the ones we've been involved with, both here in Ithaca and Elmira and out Wyoming County, they've included public input sessions to get feedback from people. So there's a lot of different people that could be involved. And again, this is outlined in long detail on some of the handouts and links in our handout. So you take this group of stakeholders, you brainstorm a little bit, and then you start going and you get safety data to figure out risk factors. And then you take those risk factors and you apply the countermeasures. Okay? Now, most commonly with local road safety plan, you're looking for most common or overrepresented, and you're going to apply what we call systemic countermeasures. You can also look at hotspots and corridors, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But what I want to make sure we're on the same page is why do we care so much about roadway departures? When it comes to fatal crash types, let's just look at the roadway departure portion of fatal crash types. 11% is when somebody overturns. They turn the vehicle over, okay? 11% is going to be a head-on. 28% is they hit an object. Okay, so we're right there. We're already getting close to that 50% threshold, which is a roadway departure incident. Where they've left the lane, they've left the roadway, and they've had a problem that led to a serious injury or a fatality. And yes, some of that is going to deal with people having their seatbelts on or not. Some of that deals with speed, but there's an awful lot we can do to help make everybody safer. And the idea behind systemic safety is pretty cool in that we can focus on critical locations before a crash occurs. Now think about that. How many times have you been in a meeting and somebody says, do we have to wait until there's someone injured or killed before we do something? Well, the answer with a local road safety plan is no. You can actually fix the problem before the crash occurs by having a plan. And we'll come back and do an example to show how that works. Now, this is a map. I've shown this before. If you've been on some of these webinars, this is a list of the fatal crashes in 3 years in the southern tier around Ithaca. And I'm going to highlight them a couple of times so you can see them blow up. They're a little easier to see that way. But can you see a place that needs to be treated? There's a hot spot. Now, with just fatals, it may be hard to miss or catch, hot spots. But the reality is we've done a pretty good job of catching most of the hot spots. And I'll come back to that also. The state's roadway departure safety action plan. But the idea behind systemic safety is we look for the common factors in these fatal crashes. Okay? And if we have common factors, we then target our repairs, our fixes, on the places with the most of these common factors. So it's sort of like rolling a dice. Now, we do this in person. We actually give people dice and we roll it, but we're going to do virtual dice rolls today and show you how this works. Okay, so first, we're going to have everybody, you don't have to put this in the Q&A, just put it in your head. Just put it in your head. Choose a letter. NYSDOT. Pick a letter. NYSDOT. Everybody got a letter? Okay. Now, got that letter in your head? Good. Okay. Now, everybody gets to choose a Muppet. Okay, and I'm sorry, Waldorf and Statler are not from the list of 6 I want you to choose from. Choose Kermit, Miss Piggy, the Great Gonzo, the Count, Fozzie Bear, or Oscar the Grouch. Okay? Now I'm going to take my die, and I'm going to roll that die. Okay? So I want you to raise your hand if you chose Y and Kermit. Raise your hand if you chose Y and Kermit. Let me go over here and find hands. Go up to the top of the list. Nobody chose Y and Kermit. Interesting. Okay. So I guess we haven't had any crashes lately. So we're in pretty good shape. Okay. Now, everybody choose a different letter or the same one if you really prefer. And everybody choose a Muppet. Again, can be the same one if you really prefer. Okay, ready? This time it's the letter D and Fozzie the Bear. Anybody choose the letter D and Fozzie the Bear? Oh, we have somebody. Oh, we have 2 people. Okay. Oh, we got a whole bunch. We got 8, 9 people. Okay. So now we've got some crashes that have occurred. And so if we chase the crashes, we don't have enough money to fix all 9 locations. Let's fix 3 of the locations. Okay. We're going to do this one last time. Choose again a letter and choose a Muppet. Okay. Raise your hand if you chose T and the Count. Okay, we have 4 people. Okay, for those 4 people, did you also raise your hand the first time or the second time when we had Fozzie Bear and D? If you did, keep your hand up or put it back up. Aha! Here's the problem. If we chase these problems, if they're not truly hotspots, what we do is we fix a problem here, but the crash occurs over here. They're random events. And what we wind up doing is chasing after crashes, as opposed to looking for risk factors and saying, let's focus our money on the risk factors. So New York State actually did that. They started looking at the risk factor on curves. Okay, so they went and did the entire system, the state system. They went and they calculated the radius on all the curves, and they broke it down by radius into segments, ranges. So 100, 300, 300 to 500, 500 to 700, and 700 to about 1,000-foot radius. Okay? Now, if the crashes were completely random, there was no risk factors at all, we would expect 7% of the high severity and fatal crashes would occur on the sharp corners, 10% on the 300 to 500 foot corners, 6 and 5, right? But instead, when you actually look at the data, 12% occur on the sharp corners, 12% also occur on the 300 to 500s, and 7% occur on the next grouping of 500 to 700. Only when you get above 700 feet do you actually start to see less crashes than you'd see for the radius of the curve. And what that says is we want to focus our efforts on the places with the sharp corners, which makes sense. And we know a lot of these things intuitively, but it really does help develop a plan. And what are the risk factors from the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan? Well, they broke them into different types of roadways, collectors, arterials, minor collectors, minor arterials, things like that. So as an example, for the minor arterials, traffic volumes of about 3,000 to 6,000, curve radiuses that are nice and sharp, and for the state road system, a fairly narrow shoulder width. Those were risk factors where they were overrepresented. There were more crashes than you would anticipate. And so that's where you want to put your money. Now, you actually probably know most of these risk factors. You take that stakeholder group and you start developing common risk factors. So what do you think are common risk factors for your system? Just make a list. And I bet you'll come pretty close to the common risk factors that are seen nationwide. Fixed objects near the road, yep. Non-standard curves. Trees near the roadway, yep. Sharp corners. Odd geometries, okay? Yeah. So you could start making a list. And now some of these are things we can do a lot about. Some of them maybe not. Deer collisions is a challenging one. Certain times of year. Weather can be a challenging one that I see in the list. But you make that list and then you go look for data. Now, nationwide common risk factors include things like speed. Speed is a common risk factor. So roads with a higher speed limit typically have a higher crash rate or severe crash rate. Traffic volume, of course, more exposure. Lane width, shoulder width, clear zones in trees, and how wide that clear zone, how consistent it is, curves and their associated radius, super elevation. All of these things make a difference. Okay. Now, does previous crashes, does that count as a risk factor? Well, technically, if you ask the statisticians, they'll tell you no, but we always include it, partly because of communication and partly because it might have an underlying cause we just missed. So it's probably good to include that as a common risk factor. If you look at the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan for high-risk roadway features, New York State actually went through and did some calculations and looked at traffic volume, even certain counties, facility types. There's a whole bunch of different risk factors. And again, they did break them down by roadway type. So I'd advise you to go look at the appendices. And if you've got roads that are arterials and collectors, there's some really good information that you can use as a starting point for your own local road safety plan, or you can use them straight up if you need to. And we'll talk about that when we get to the money in the last 20 minutes. Now, in terms of data collection, you can measure data, you can do qualitative data, you can do surrogate data. These are all great ways to do it. We'll touch on them just briefly, but I also want you to make sure you're aware of something called CLEAR. CLEAR is a depository of crash information. We'll talk a bit about that in just a minute. But Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan is what RWDSP stands for, if you're wondering. Okay. So what measured data do you already have? What do you think you already have? You don't even have to go get it. It's available. You just have to compile it. What do you already have? You might have curve radius, you might not. If you're with DOT, you do because they already did that. But if you're on a local system, maybe you don't. But you have crash information that Clear can give you that. You have traffic counts, you have lane widths. Okay. There's ways to get a lot of these data pretty quickly, but you've certainly got links of roadways and things like that. There's a lot of data you might have. Okay. Now, in terms of what data most people have, if you don't have traffic counts, they're relatively easy to get. There's ways to get good detailed speed with radar. You can also look on the New York State Data Traffic Viewer for data like that. You might have the advisory speed on curves. You may not know the exact radius and super elevation, but you've got those data. You've got lane width. You've got shoulder widths and types. And of course, one that actually comes up quite often is rural versus urban. You already have that. And of course, it's important to know who the owner is, even though that may not change the crash frequency. It's certainly something you have to think about. And of course, you have other data. Now, what do you do if you don't have the data? Well, you can do what's known as qualitative or surrogate data. So go back to curve radius. You may not have the curve radius, but you have an advisory speed from your ball bank indicator, and that gives you a relativeness of how sharp the corner is. So you take the differential between the speed limit and the ball bank value that's hopefully on the plaque on the sign. Guess what? That's a really good surrogate set of data for the curve radius. And it actually builds in the super elevation at the same time. For a clear zone, maybe you go with a qualitative. Just go with narrow, wide, high risk, low risk, things like that. Things you could quantify pretty quickly and simply. Same with lane width, narrow, average, wide, shoulder type, no shoulder, paved shoulder, unpaved shoulder. And then you could use that as a possible factor to see if there's overrepresentation. So what do you see here in the Q&A? Give me two things you see here that you think are safety features that then maybe you need to look at your whole system. Just give me two. We'll see in the Q&A and we'll move on. We'll see if we can get a couple of things people see. I know we'll actually get three or four, but I'm asking for at least two. There's a drop off at the ditch. Yeah, that could be an issue. So maybe we need to look at ditch depths and things like that. Yeah, that's one. What else? There may be some fixed objects. Is that mailbox a good fixed object? There's no shoulder. Again, you can do that. How about here? What do you see in this case? Again, just looking for a couple of possibilities. There's a rail end. There's a terminus, which is the wrong kind of terminus. We know that's pretty bad if you hit one of those. So maybe you need to look for those. Are those involved in crashes on your system? Okay. And we'll see if I get one more here real quick. And again, there's no shoulder. And actually, if you look at that edge cracking, which you're thinking, well, how's edge cracking deal with safety? That edge cracking is because there's a shoulder drop off. They didn't back it up, and we know that's a safety issue. And there may be trees in the clear zone. So again, you start doing an evaluation, and then you say, let's look at the whole system. And again, there is something called the Crash Location and Engineering Analysis Repository, or CLEAR. And you have, as a municipality, you have access to it. For those of you with a consulting firm, if the municipality is doing a study, there's a way for you to get access as part of that study. You'll need to work with the state DOT on that. But the idea is you can get all the crash data. So this is Lewis County records over about a 10-year period. This is all crashes, so it's probably a bit much. But if you look at just the serious and fatal crashes, we can start focusing in on the kinds of risk factors we're worried about. In fact, you can even go beyond that for a local road safety plan. You can even look at particular crashes and go, wait a second, I got a couple on top of each other. What happened? Now, these were only injury crashes as opposed to the two fatals you see that are red, but you can actually look at the police reports. In this case, the north scales are in the wrong direction on one versus the other, so it gets confusing, but it turns out in both cases, somebody left their lane and hit a vehicle going in the other direction. A crossover crash, which is a roadway departure, okay? And so you can take all of these data, look for risk factors, look things like crash trees that can be developed. And the cool thing about doing all of this is you start to get a sense of what the high risk factors are. So as an example, these are data actually from St. Lawrence County, okay? And there were 85 crashes over a 5-year period that we found on the non-state system. We looked for rural areas, so we wanted, and roadway departure crashes. So we broke that down. So we then broke it into traffic volume, less than 500, less than 2,000, less than 5,000, less, greater than 5,000. And yes, sometimes numbers drop out because there wasn't recorded data. Data is king. And then we looked at speed, broke it into speed. Was the speed 30 or less, or was the speed 35 or more? Okay, the speed limit, just the speed limit itself. And then finally, was it curved or straight segments? And as soon as you do that, you can even see it. You don't even have to do the math, but let me pick a color that's going to work better here. How about blue? That'll do. Look at this. We've got a couple of cells that really pop out that say, wait a second, we've got a lot of issues with curves and with straights, and you can do the math. So for instance, speed greater than 35, 95% is severe and fatals. Not surprising. So maybe we need to focus on those higher speed roadways at first. Not to say we want to ignore the others, but we got to start somewhere. And if you look at curves, even though those straight segments that seem to dominate, what percentage of roads are curves? It's still 42% when you do the math out. So maybe we need to look at our sharp curves, okay? And you can start doing this. Now, I will say you might find hotspots, and New York State, when they did their analysis, did do a statewide review of all roads for roadway departure crashes, and they came up with high crash rates on certain road segments. And the idea here is going back to your statistics that you took in school, where you take and you determine a crash rate and the average and the standard deviation. And they defined it as hotspot primary locations were ones where the crash rate was more than 2 standard deviations from the mean statewide. Okay? Secondary locations were ones that were more than 1 standard deviation, which works out to about 2% of the system as primary locations and 16% for secondary locations. And within the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan, you can find something called the HSIP, or Highway Safety Improvement Program Action Plan Viewer. And there are layers there, including the owner of the road, if it's tribal or non-tribal areas. And they listed those locations, those hotspot zones. So I live in Ithaca, so I did a search, and near my neighborhood, there is a local street that is eligible under the secondary crash density criteria as a hotspot. Now, I can be better than that, and I can look at the data and go down, but I used to live in Yates County, worked for the highway department. So there, let's go look, and you see a lot of green. So let's focus in. We'll go right into Pinyan area, into the town of Milo. And you can see that there's a county road there, a major collector just outside the village that's actually eligible as a hotspot under the primary crash density criteria. So again, there are some possible hotspots, and guess what? If you are in that list, those roads are eligible to use proven countermeasures. And what are proven countermeasures? Well, there are tons of them. We could spend, heck, we've done webinars on proven countermeasures. We did it over 3 different hours. So that's how many different proven countermeasures there are. Federal Highway Administration lists 22 total, and they're beyond just roadway departures. But looking at this list, which of these have you used? Now, if you're with a consulting firm, which ones have you designed or been part of as an improvement? Just to see which ones people have looked at, just to get a sense. Okay? There's tons of them out there. Now, they're not always roadway departure repairs. They could be ones based on intersections like roundabouts or crosswalk improvements. But safety edge, pavement markings, clear zones, curve delineation, those are certainly primarily focused on roadway departures. And within the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan and Federal Highway, there are eligible countermeasures. If it's in any of these lists or you've developed them yourself, go for it. Okay? So just think about this, and again, this can develop a plan. Now here's the hardest step of any action plan, whether it's pavement management, safety action plans, or anything, and that's implementing the solutions. Okay? It's sort of like playing music. You gotta practice, 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 and you gotta have a performance. So you gotta get that buy-in from those stakeholders. That's just step 1, which is why that stakeholder group is so important. You gotta find money. Now you might be able to get a grant, and we're gonna talk about this here in the last 20 minutes of this session today. And there are other grants. And in fact, we did a grant webinar on Tuesday. Recording is available. But you got to find money. And sometimes you're going to have to find money that's maintenance money, okay? Because if you build something, you have to maintain it. And that means you're going to have to get buy-in from the elected board. And you have to have updates to the plan. And how often do you do that plan? And the best plans are flexible. You don't follow them blindly. You use them as plans, guides to help choose things. Now, let's just ask, because I'm curious, how long do you think a local road safety plan is valid? And this is in years. Give me whole years. Don't give me decimal years. It gets weird. So give me whole years, whole numbers. Okay? You give a decimal point, it treats it weird. Okay? So we have 1, 3, 4, 5, and 10 so far. 10's the largest. Okay? And again, for a local road safety plan, 10 years might be okay. But ask yourself if things change, if they drop off, is that good? And I see some in the Q&As put 5. Certainly, I think it lasts more than one. Do I think it lasts as many as 20 that is listed there? I don't think so. If someone were to ask me, I like the 5 to 10. I think that's a good range. But again, it's like a bell curve in a lot of ways. And you may have different focuses over time. So the, think about when you might want to update that. Now, what does an implementation plan look like? Well, look, I just threw this as an example. It's too small. I know it. That's what you're all thinking. It's only a model just to illustrate that you need good information. Okay? So go look at other plans. There's tons out there. We've given you links to a few. Check with your MPO if you're in an MPO area, or even with your county. See if they've got one. Read somebody else's. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And you're going to need to have information about economics and money. What are the priorities? What are the solutions that you're thinking about? It's not final design, it's just macro level stuff. What are the solutions you're thinking about? And of course, some estimates of costs. With those estimates of cost, there are ways to calculate the benefits. Okay, if you're interested, there's good information on how to do that. And then when do you need to get it done? How long is it going to take? Is it a 6-month project, a 1-year project? Could you include it as part of a maintenance activity? And it's actually a good idea to think about how you might fund it. Are you going to try to fund it with grants? Are you going to try to fund it with local funds? How are you going to pay for it long term? And develop an implementation plan. Now, your local road safety plan can focus on the risk factors, this concept of systemic safety and overrepresented crashes. But some people like in their local road safety plans to include location issues. They look for hotspots and intersections and corridors. And I know we're talking about roadway departures, but in a local road safety plan, we'll look at all crash types. And so you may have intersection issues that you're going to look at as well. You could also, by the way, choose a countermeasure and apply it systematically, not just systemic, not just where the high risk parts are, but everywhere. So for instance, the safety edge, which is where you essentially put it in the paver, a flatter angle, is a systemic approach. Now, does anybody here use this safety edge? Just raise your hand if your agency uses the safety edge. I'm just curious. Yeah, we got a couple. Okay. Again, one that's probably good to do systematically. Having mailbox policies, having breakaway signs are kinds of proven countermeasures that you might just implement everywhere. Okay? So let's do a quick example and then we'll talk about the money side of the equation. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a very quick, it's semi-fake, okay? I took some data from the Tompkins County Safety Action Plan that they developed. I simplified it because Tompkins County uses weighted factors. And at first cut, I like to not use weighted factors and actually chose a subset area, which is sort of off the beaten path of what you might include, which is Cornell. But it's, again, this is not real data. This is just, I took it as a starting point to illustrate quickly in just a few minutes. So identifying the stakeholders, they had lots of stakeholders from all the public agencies, the businesses, the schools, everything we talked about before. So you can go read their plan, and it's pretty comprehensive. They then went and they calculated risk factors. They mapped all the crashes in the area. They listed the common risk factors and looked for overrepresented or common crashes. Now, again, I did not pull their full list out. I chose a few that popped up quite often, okay? So traffic volume of 2,000 or more was something that came up. I think actually 2,500 was actually one of the flags too. Sharp radius on curves. A number of lanes greater than 2 was an issue. Speed. high speed was an issue, and then there were a lot of crashes at signalized intersections. There were more, but I chose five, just as an example. And then I decided, let's apply those factors to a subset of Tompkins County, the Cornell University Central Campus, which is all local roads. There's no collectors or arterials on the roads that Cornell University maintains. Okay, so as an example. And you can do this. You can take a local road safety plan developed for a larger area and do subsets. Now, you may realize I need to do additional data collection or more focused stuff, but start with the big one. It actually can work pretty well. So in this case, we've got a whole bunch of roads, okay? And then I looked at what ones had curves, okay? So I chose not every road, but a lot of roads on the central campus. And I said, well, these roads have signals. No road on the campus has high speed, so that's not a risk factor. There have been a couple of crashes, okay? Curves, which roads have curves that are sharp enough to meet the criterion, and then higher volume roadways. So all you do is you take all those factors and you add them up, okay? So you can see there are two roads, part of what used to be called East Avenue, now Feeney Way, that has three risk factors, and Hoy Road, which right now, by the way, doesn't have any crashes because it's closed for some construction, but three risk factors. So you would just prioritize, if you don't use weights, you would just prioritize based upon adding those up. And again, you could use weighted factors, and Tompkins County does have weighted factors. And you'll see that in this case, your first two roads you'd focus on would be the two A's, which would be Hoy Road and Feeney Way at the northern end, where you've got risk factors. There's a road in there that has a crash that doesn't show up because that crash wasn't related to the risk factors. One individual isolated crash doesn't say you're going to go there. You want to go where there's more risk factors. And you're going to match the solutions to the risk factors. In this case, you're going to focus on maybe pavement markings, better signals, crosswalk improvements, and delineation for curves. Okay? You're not going to do much else. You don't necessarily need to do much else. You're certainly not going to be able to improve a clear zone. You're not putting a roundabout in. You're not putting in rumble strips or a safety edge. You match the solutions to the risk factors. And then, of course, the hardest part is to implement a solution and figure out the plans for that. Okay? So that's the basics of a local road safety plan. Now, before we get into the money, one last question for you. What is not required to have a ready-to-go local road safety plan? Choose the one on this list that doesn't fit. I've seen people say this, and it actually, there's some confusion because of the way the state's roadway departure safety action plan is written. Okay? It absolutely, we do definitely have a well-thought prioritization. Nobody's choosing that. That's good. You definitely want public involvement. That's really good. Good to see. Okay? Updated recently, but again, we talked about what does that mean? Is that 5 years, 10 years? Again, don't let it sit on a shelf and not get implemented. That doesn't help anybody. The commitment by the elected board is absolutely critical. It's one of the most important steps because if they're not, on board, they're not willing to set it into the budget, how's it going to get done? Okay, so yeah, it's the collectors' arterials. A lot of people say, well, we should focus on the collectors and arterials. No, we should focus on the levels of risk for our municipality. And it may be the local system winds up being higher in terms of risk. We know that there are more crashes on the local system per vehicle mile, but because there's so much less exposure, we don't see as many crashes. But that doesn't mean it's not a high risk issue. So you really should include the entire system, okay? So now let's talk about money. Excuse me, pardon me for coughing. There are two things I want you to think about. One is a longer term, because again, we're not just talking about now. Longer term, look for monies coming out through the federal budget process. There's SS4A, Safe Streets and Roads for All, funds that come out on a regular basis that are part of the IIJA or the BIL or whatever you like. So my friend Bill there. But also there is the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan. And oh, I apologize. I didn't catch that. Sorry, Robert and Andrew. Let me get white there. Got to get this right because it is important. And it should be, we'll put that in there. There we go. Okay. It's the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan. They originally had a call for $90 million. It didn't get spent. There's $50 million available. That's a lot of money. That includes the local roads. Okay. It's not for the state system, it's for local roads. So that's $50 million. Now, when I say local roads, I want you to understand I'm not just looking at local roads. I'm looking at local roads. MPOs can put plans in if you're on Native American or tribal lands or the Seneca Nation or someone like that. You're also eligible here in New York State, not state highways. You can bundle. There's nothing wrong with bundling. If you wanted to have all the towns in a particular county improve their uh, roadside hardware, go for it. Bundling is a great idea. Just have to have a lead agency. And the cool thing about this, up to 95% of the cost is covered by the grant. So the match is only 5%. It's a very small match. But of course, you have to have good justification to get the funds. So guess what? You want a local road safety plan. If you don't have a plan, these monies can be used to develop such a plan. Now, I do want to remind you that it is local federal aid. You're going to have things like state-local agreements. It is a reimbursement program, and while 95% of the cost might get reimbursed, the agency has to have enough money to cover the cost short term, which is why it's so important to have that commitment from the elected board. And there will be steps in the process. If you're not familiar with the federal aid process, we did a workshop on it last week, and we can help you there, and so can your regional local project liaisons. It's an authorization first program. You have to go and get authorization to go from step to step to step. So it is federal aid. Just keep that in mind. Now, what's eligible? Well, those hotspots that are part of the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan, if it's listed as a priority countermeasure in the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan, those locations are eligible, okay, which includes arterials and collectors. But again, if you've got a local road safety plan, every road is eligible. If you're choosing from proven countermeasures, you can put in for proven countermeasures. Even now, even if you don't have a full plan, though, you'll be more competitive if you've got a local road safety plan. So what I'm telling people, and again, we can have nuances here a little bit, but do you have a local road safety plan? If you raised your hand earlier, well, get ready to implement a project and apply for an implementation grant or a project grant. If not, go for a planning grant, okay? And the handouts, open up your chat pod. Make sure you open up your chat pod in about 30 seconds. We'll give you time to open up your chat pod. Amanda or Jody will drop in the answers. And if you can't access them, we can get you a link. So they're going to do this again for me. They're great in the background. There we go. Now, so let's go back to our list. So those of you who checked no or not sure, okay, or even if you're working on one, hey, think about going and getting some funding. Okay, so there's a way to get things implemented. There's funds available. Again, $50 million. Now, if you're looking on developing a local road safety plan, if you're in that group, in that particular case, contact the state DOT. And the person that we've been asked to have you contact is our friend Andrew. I haven't checked to see if Andrew hopped on yet. Let me go down to the attendee list before I throw him under the bus here. Oh, he's not on here today. But contact Andrew Sattinger. He's with the New York State Department of Transportation, and he can help you make sure you ask the right questions on the application to do a local road safety action plan. And I see Robert Zatowski is here. He works with Andrew very closely. Tell you what, Amanda or Jody, make Robert a panelist so he can answer questions here right at the very end. But if you want to develop a local road safety plan, contact the State Department of Transportation or go to their webpage, okay? And that's handed in the link, okay? And again, that should be in the chat pod, and we can also email that to you if need be, okay? And by the way, if you have any questions about CLEAR, yeah, Andrew's real good with CLEAR and getting the data out of it. We can help you some, but Andrew's really the expert in that case. If you want to implement a project, okay, you're going to do a project application. There is a link right on the web page from the state DOT's website, okay? So you don't have to memorize any of that. And the idea is you're going to fill out a form. It's 2 pages. Now, I'll admit, by the time you type things in, it might get a little longer because the project justification, it only give you one small space. You really want to do a good job there of explaining things, Okay, but it's a really pretty simple form. This is the entire thing. And I know it's small, but I just want you to realize it's not complicated. So go start thinking about developing a local road safety plan or implementing one or going out and getting proven countermeasures. And if it's in the roadway departure safety action plan, if it's one proven from Federal Highway Administration, or it's part of your own data-driven local plan, which may officially be called a local road safety plan or not, it's eligible, as long as you can justify it and show the benefits. Okay? So going back and looking at that list of eligible countermeasures, I went through the list of the people who got money in the first round, and I highlighted the proven countermeasures or eligible countermeasures for roadway departures that were being implemented. So there were obviously edge lane markings. People were doing enhanced curve signs, flashing beacons to help people at corners and intersections even. There were shards in cars, rumble strips. There were adding MUTCD compliant curve warning signs and pavement markings. And there are some nuances there that are important. Widening shoulders and improving friction. Improving barriers, including the median barrier between multi-lanes. Those are included. And of course, local road safety plans are included as well, if you don't have one. But, think about it. Breakaway supports. Raise your hand if your agency still has signs that don't have breakaway supports. Raise your hand. I just want to get a number. I don't care names. Nobody here today? Well, that's good. That's good. But if you know places that don't have breakaway signs, maybe you could bundle that for an entire county. Maybe you could look at flattening some slopes. And yes, I know you're like, oh, that means right of way. Well, guess what? The funds can be used to purchase right of way. So you could get that flattened slope, widen that clear zone out. Maybe you add shoulder edge wedge into your overall plans. There's plenty of things out there. Now, again, I'm only listing the ones for roadway departures. There's plenty of other countermeasures out there. So which one of these is not a roadway departure proven countermeasure? Which one of these is not? Yeah, roundabouts. Yeah, all the others are roadway departure safety action plan proven countermeasures, every one of them. Okay? And again, think about the list, go through it, develop a plan. And again, local road safety plans are a proven countermeasure in of themselves, but there's money available to develop such a plan. Now, do you have any questions? Well, of course you've got questions. If you got questions, you can throw them in the Q&A now. We'll do a best we can to answer them. Okay? But you could also possibly talk to the state DOT. And again, that contact information is in the handout. You can look for Andrew Sattinger. And again, I'll open it up here in just a couple of minutes. Right at the very end, if you've got any questions, Robert can answer them. He's online. He's Robert Zatowski. He's with the state DOT. So we can get your questions answered. You might have to send an email in to get more details. But I can tell you right now, if you're not sure, ask. And as a perfect example, there was a county that was trying to decide whether they could purchase a road striper. Okay, now this is not their road striper. I just found this off the internet. Okay, but they want to know, could they purchase a road striper? So they emailed the DOT. Okay, actually they emailed us and we forwarded it to the DOT, to Andrew and Robert. And they went through and they said, well, yes, it is eligible as long as you're using it immediately. You justified how you're going to use it, and now you have something longer term. So it's a win-win for everybody. You have to have a benefit cost analysis. You're going to have to show what you're doing with it in the short term to justify the initial cost. But yeah, you can get some funds. Will it be the full 95% by the time they write everything up? That depends how well they write it. That depends on how the justification comes into play. But guess what? If you don't ask, you're never going to know. So my advice to anybody, absolutely ask. And there's a great question. And again, we'll leave that particular question in the Q&A about who's justified. I'm going to leave that question. We're going to bring Robert on here in just a couple of minutes. So we'll leave that one up. It's a great question in the Q&A pod. We'll look at that in just a minute. And Robert Zatowski is already typing an answer. If you're wondering, the question is, can municipalities who are awarded before get awarded additional money, and when the applications are due? I will tell you right now, the applications are due when you put them in. That much I can say, but Robert's typing an answer right now. So, um, everybody, let me clear this. I'm going to clear the responses. I thought I cleared that. What are the three FHWA crash focus areas? Put those in. What do you think? Do you remember those? Roadway departures, which is what we're talking about today. Intersections, yep. Okay. There's one more group. There's actually pedestrians and bicycles. Very good. You got all three. Again, New York State has a roadway departure safety action plan. They're developing a local roads plan for intersections, and they've already got a pedestrian plan. So the idea is there's going to be lots of stuff. Okay. Now, I do want to mention the fact that we do have additional webinars, okay, that are available to folks. But what I want to do now is, again, we get 55 minutes we did for the webinar portion. But what I want to do is I want to answer any other questions that you've got. And we've got Robert Zatowski online available to answer any questions you've got to the best of our abilities. We will do so because we want to make sure you have the right questions asked. And of course, if need be, you can show up and come to one of our other webinars or go watch a recording. So now I'm going to put this slide up as our thank you slide. But let's go ahead in the Q&A. Do you have any questions right now? And again, I'll read the first one that Robert already answered. But again, I'd love to answer a few questions now. And that first question was, can municipalities who are awarded before get more money? And the answer is, yep, they can. Um, the due date has not been established. So again, put in your application now. The application is still available. Get the money. It's okay. Okay. Robert, you got anything you want to say on top of that? I think you should be able to speak now.
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay. So anything
So,
additional about the timing and or uh, what's eligible?
yeah, absolutely. Um, so regarding the roadway departure safety action plan, round two, there aren't a lot of details available yet. We are funding the roadway departure countermeasures like you showed in your slides, um, as well as, of course, the local road safety plans. We really want that to be the focus. Um, I know you mentioned roundabouts, David, and yes, they are not funded under
Nope.
this plan. However, they could be funded with HSIP money in general.
Yep.
So, yeah,
And when you develop your intersection plan over the next year to 18 months, they might be eligible then. If people have a plan, they could look at implementing it later down the road. So, yeah. So again, think about things in your system. I'd love to see more listed here. And I know I go around the state and I see barriers that could be improved and breakaway supports that could be added in. So if you've got those, start thinking about it, putting it in. And you don't mind getting applications now, right, Robert?
that's a very good question.
Well,
Um,
I'll
right.
tell you
So the
what,
roadway, yeah,
why don't you
tell us
find
what
that
you
out?
guys want to do, I
Why don't
think
you
is the
find
first
out,
step.
yeah,
Yeah,
find out whether or not they can go ahead and put their applications in. It looked to me like they could. Confirm that, and we'll make sure we throw a note up on our both our social media and on the page where we put the recording for the webinar. How about that?
good idea. Thank you, David.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. Again. And then once we get a date or any other details, we will post them in our monthly newsletter. So again, we'd love to see that. Any other questions folks have? They're going to let you off the hook, it looks like, Robert.
Yeah, we look forward to hearing from you guys. The clear access,
Yep.
you can go to our website. Andrew Sattinger is the HSIP program manager. So, yeah, you would contact him if you want funds. Um, and you'd go to the DOT site, like I mentioned, if you wanted access to crash data.
Yep. And so that's definitely something you might want to think about. Okay. Okay. I think That's about all. I am going to be nice to folks. If you didn't get the poll, I'm going to put in the chat for everybody a link to the state's Road Departure Safety Action Plan webpage, so you don't have to memorize all that stuff or type it all in. And again, it's also in the handout that's available to you as well.
We
Okay?
also have on that website um, a list of the regional local program liaisons, which you mentioned, David. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you
There's the
go
web
down
page
a
there.
little bit,
And
yeah,
there's the right there, Appendix A, Roadway Departure Local Call Contact List. And you click on that, and it's got MPO contacts, it's got the regional planning contacts, MPOs, all the different contacts you could possibly want. So, again, when I said read the appendices, I meant read the appendices. Some really good information in those things, including, like, for instance, the risk factor maps that we talked about a little bit. So, there's tons of good information there. Spend the time, it'll definitely be worth it, and you'll pick up some ideas. Even if you have to fund things on your own, there's lots of good information. So I'll just pull up as an example. There's a risk factor map for Albany County. Okay. Okay. With that, I'm going to put on our final website thing because there's our website, or you can send me an email or just send a general email to clrp@cornell.edu. We'd be glad to help you out if you have any questions. My hope is that by the time we get another month or two, so many people put in applications, Andrew and Robert can give all that money out. Because $50 million would go a long ways to helping on the local system. And someone asked in the Q&A, does the state keep track of I-90 data? Of course they do. Absolutely. Yeah. The National Highway System, there's a lot of data they keep on the I-90, any of the interstate systems and the National Highway System. Yeah. Okay, everybody, have a great day. And hopefully we'll see you next week on Snow and Ice or the week after that for pavement maintenance or one of our workshops. We'll be going around the state and everywhere from Kerisko Falls out to Niagara Falls. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.